Welcome back, Screen Crush. I'm Ryan Airy. During the finale of Ms.Marvel, we got our first confirmed mutant in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Kamala, there's something different in your genes, like a mutation.
Now, because Disney acquired Fox, we could be seeing MCU mutants earlier than we ever expected. There may even be mutants already in the MCU that we don't even know about. They could introduce some genetic mutations to characters established since Phase 1. So in this video, we're going to break down who else could be a mutant, and believe me, there's some pretty big surprises in there when you lay out the logic the MCU has now established. So let's get started. In the series Ms.Marvel, Kamala's great-grandmother was exiled from a different dimension and passed down her genetics through the generations, with Kamala ending up with powers. She's half human, half clandestine. She can harness her light powers from the Nord dimension with the help of a bangle. Now in the comics, Kamala was an inhuman, whose powers activated when she was hit with Terrigen Mist. But the MCU being the MCU, we've already taken a turn from the comics.
That's pretty weird and complicated.
Yeah, it is, but we've already seen someone with an origin this complicated in the MCU. The Scarlet Witch, aka Wanda Maximoff, who is a mutant in the comics. In the MCU, Wanda was apparently always a witch, but her powers were activated by the Mind Stone. Now we think it's the same with Kamala. According to Bruno, she always had this Nor magic within her. But after going through her close family records, only Kamala has this genetic mutation. And I think it has to do with the bangle. Now it could be that Kamala has always had this mutation since birth, but I think her genes mutated when she put on the bangle for the first time. Remember, only Kamala and her grandmother Sana can see the visions being sent by Aisha.
Did you see the train, beta?
Theoretically, not only should Kamala have this power, but Muniba and Amir should too, considering they're also part clandestine. But only Kamala and Sana can harness the Nor because they were the only ones who put on the bracelet, which means Sana is probably a mutant too. But this brings up a couple of questions. Can specific objects or even events trigger gene mutation? Are there already mutants in the MCU that we don't know about? And if so, who else is a mutant? Well, here is our theories.
Tell me!
Now, before we talk about who else could be a mutant, first we have to address one important thing. How are all of these people getting superpowers without dying? Why does radiation give Peter Parker spider powers instead of cancer? See people, this is why comics are important. In the comics, humans have a genetic code implanted in them from the Celestials. This new DNA structure is why humans can get superpowers when exposed to dangerous threats. This also allowed for the development of mutations that caused innate superpowers in mutants. When the Celestials visited Earth in the Stone Age, they experimented on the early human species. This was to create a sort of antibody system that protected the celestial baby inside the core of the Earth. This is why humans, when faced with danger, will activate the celestial seed inside of them. So the reason people who live on Earth can get superpowers is because they kind of act like antibodies defending the celestial baby within the Earth. And they defend the baby from world threats like, I don't know, the World Eater Galactus, for example. Now, we've already seen Celestials in the MCU.
I'm what's called a Celestial, sweetheart.
Every billion years, new Celestials must be born. I plant celestial seeds into host planets across the universe.
Now, assuming this lore holds up in the MCU, this could explain how our heroes are able to get their powers. Not only get superpowers, but develop mutations that are meant to help against larger threats.
But what threats in the MCU could have triggered these celestial seeds?
Oh yeah, what possible threats in the MCU have been so large they could trigger a genetic mutation? I mean, here's a few. Alright, but I can think of at least 4 possible explanations for these genetic mutations triggering now. Perhaps the biggest event that happened in the MCU history, the blip. Thanos didn't really think of the ramifications of his little cosmic genocide, did he?
I'm a big enough man to admit when I'm wrong.
Half the population gone, just like that. According to the Eternals, this had a major consequence on the birth of the Earth Celestial. The baby Celestial was now vulnerable and had to be protected.
In order to grow, Tiamat needs vast amounts of energy from intelligent life.
So, before the snap was reversed, these humans who returned could have had their celestial seed activated to withstand such threats. Large encounters that threaten the celestial plan of life, just like in the comics. So, anyone who rematerialized from the blip would have their genetic makeup rewritten, or mutated, in order to become stronger. And those born from people whose genetics were changed could develop mutations of their own. Like in WandaVision, Monica Rambeau goes through Wanda's hex 3 times, her body changing every time she goes through. The final time, she gets powers to see energy fields and phase through objects, which is why another explanation for the celestial seed activation is the literal changing of reality. Yep, the Scarlet Witch could actually be the cause of mutants in the MCU and not the cause of their disappearance like in the comics. Monica's powers could be a mutation, her genes strengthening to withstand Wanda's hex multiple times. Otherwise, if being in the hex was all it took, the entire town of Westview would have superpowers. Kitty from that 70s show would be super speed cooking through her morning bacon. And by the way, exciting news, we now have a merch store. You can get your own Screen Crush branded merch or this really awesome, my favorite, the original trilogy t-shirt. We're going to be constantly adding stuff to this store, so check out shopzeroedition.com to get your Screen Crush merch today. Now back to the mutants. In Kamala's case, her mutant powers came from the bangle, an artifact more than thousands of years old with a supernatural origin. So, explanation number 3, maybe objects with a magical, multiversal, or interdimensional background can affect the body of a human.
We believe your genetics could be the answer to why it is that you can shape the Noor here.
In our previous videos, we theorized that the bangle might be one of the negabands worn by the hero Marvel in the comics, or possibly the quantum bands typically worn by the hero Quasar. So we saw the bangle come from a temple of the Ten Rings, the same organization that we saw in Shang-Chi. The rings were already sending a beacon to someone, possibly to the bangle. The bangle could be the Ten Rings' other half. The point is, ancient artifacts of mysterious past could pose a threat to the humans on Earth, which would activate the celestial seed within Kamala. Number 4, the seed activation could happen just how it started, by scientific experimentation. This would include not only body experimentation, but blood transfusions as well. People are experimenting on all the time in the MCU. All the time. When something unnatural enters the body initiates a natural defense mechanism. The human celestial seed would be activated if injected with blood or cells from an already enhanced person. So, with all these explanations for introducing mutants in the MCU, who can we expect to come out as a mutant in Phase 4? And just to be clear, we're not saying these people will definitely be mutants or suddenly switch their origin story. This is just a way the MCU can do a little bit of retconning in a way that makes sense. Well, our first official mutant is half interdimensional. Like we mentioned before, Kamala Khan is half human, half clandestine. The same goes for Kamran.
What about Kamran? Wasn't he born here too?
That bangle helps you unlock the Noor. Maybe one day, something will do the same for him.
Kamran has the literal rift of the Noor dimension within him. Without a bangle to help him control it, his powers can change on their own, mutate until it destroys him.
I feel like I'm being crushed from the inside out.
Hopefully, there's a school of some sort to help him work with his powers. Wink, wink. We also have Shang-Chi, another half interdimensional being. His dad, Wenwu, was a warlord from Earth. His mom was from Ta Lo, the dimension protecting Earth from the Dweller in Darkness. Now, like we mentioned before, the Ten Rings could be the counterpart to Kamala's bangle. So if the bangle is what created the mutation in Kamala, then the rings could have mutated Shang-Chi's already enhanced genes. It would also make sense that his sister Zhe Ling would be a mutant, because she is also from Ta Lo. Since she never wore the rings, her genes would not have mutated to accommodate their power. Similar to Kamala's mom and brother. This would be how the MCU would match up with the comics. Only select humans can develop superpowers and mutations. Now, what other half-Terran character do we know?
Star-Lord.
Who?
Yep. The most frustrating Guardian of the Galaxy, Peter Quill, might have just been a mutant this entire time. Now, while his mom was from Earth, his dad was a literal celestial, Ego the Living Planet.
I see it within you. An unorthodox genealogy.
We see in Guardians 2 that Ego planted his seed all over the galaxy, kind of like your dad. And he wanted to see these kids help him remake the universe in his image. The only child who survived was Peter. So, how did Peter survive? Because of the celestial seed that was planted in human genetics centuries ago, allowing humans to harness this energy. Perhaps once Ego gave him more of the energy, Peter's genes were enhanced, which gives him the ability to fight Ego in Guardians 2. But I don't think only half humans can become mutants. There are probably already mutants who are fully from Earth. Humans we've already seen since the beginning of the franchise, like Steve Rogers. He takes a modified version of the serum that Erskine gave the Red Skull. Like we said, when something unnatural enters the body initiates a natural defense mechanism. The serum reacts to people differently. Steve's genes could have mutated over time to harness the strength given by the serum. And similar to how Kamala's powers are activated by the energy of the Noor, it takes the energy of Vita rays to activate the serum within Steve. It's also similar to Jennifer Walters. Now, we know Jennifer Walters gets her She-Hulk powers after getting a blood transfusion from her cousin Bruce Banner. But, like we mentioned before, maybe a genetic mutation can happen if the donor is already enhanced. In this case, the transfusion infected with gamma radiation. This could explain why Jennifer's powers are not exactly like Bruce's. If this is the route She-Hulk takes to explain her powers, then they could also do this with her rival, Titania. Now, in the comics, Titania's powers come from a deal that she made with Dr. Doom during the Secret Wars on another patchwork planet as they were fighting a being called the Beyonder. Very complicated. So I think they're going to way simplify this for the MCU. And even better, this could be a really good twist for Emil Blonsky, aka the Abomination. After the literal Abomination of the Incredible Hulk movie, this would help bring back the cool character that we know from the comics. We see Blonsky in a holding cell here. Maybe he's here because a government agency is researching his blood signatures, seeing how his genes mutated over time after injecting himself with Banner's blood. A truly great revival for Tim Roth in the MCU. And speaking of revivals in the MCU, we still have not seen the aftermath of Ghost's condition since Ant-Man and the Wasp. Last we saw, Scott was exploring the quantum realm to help Ava remain stable before Hank, Hope, and Janet got dusted. Maybe we'll find out that Ava's body mutated during the experiment catastrophe, and this quantum energy is the one way to keep her stabilized. And I hope we'll see her in the new Thunderbolts movie, along with US Agent and Yelena Belova.
Take a fork, eat. Eat, please. My daddy says it's good for you.
You know, Yelena, speaking of your dad, he might just be a possible mutant in the MCU. Yes, Alexei, aka the Red Guardian.
It still fits.
Since he took a version of the super soldier serum in the 80s, he's been benched in jail after one mission. It could be that this super soldier has evolved into a full mutant with enhanced Captain America powers. Hopefully, we get to see Red Guardian again with evolved powers fighting the new Captain America.
I grab hold of his shield.
Sure you did, buddy. And you know what? Maybe there wasn't even an experiment. He could just be lying and he was born a mutant and the Soviet government covered it up.
Are you calling me a liar or something? Huh?
But the main and most obvious candidates for official mutanthood are the Maximoff twins.
Wait, ain't they both dead?
No.
No one's ever really gone.
Yeah, Wanda is definitely not dead after the Multiverse of Madness. They're saving her for something bigger. As for Pietro, well, we technically have a new Pietro.
Pietro, if you will.
Oh, sorry, I meant
Ralph Boner?
Since Ralph was both within Wanda's hex in Westview and manipulated by Agatha's magic, his celestial seed would activate to help protect him from more witches. Ralph could get his genes mutated to get super speed, a fun nod to the Fox X-Men franchise. And maybe the twins could reunite and Wanda could eventually gain a surrogate brother. And finally, our favorite space cadet, Monica Rambeau.
I'm sorry, what?
Once again, we saw Monica's cells being rewritten when she goes through the hex. Her new energy powers are how her celestial seed activated to strengthen her. Now, this could be just a cliche superhero trope, but when Monica got her powers, her eyes changed colors. Similarly, Kamala's eyes changed to reflect the Bangle's power. Monica's powers are based on light manipulation. It'll be exciting to see both Ms.Marvel and Monica in the Marvels. They'll compare their powers and with Carol's help can figure out exactly what's going on in their DNA. So, that's our theory. That's who we think could be a mutant in the MCU. I'm sure you guys have a lot of thoughts on this. Let me know in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell for alerts. For Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Airy.